It didn't matter if they were businessmen, artists, political leaders, or inventors. They all had developed the ability to consciously direct their inner energies toward outward purposes. And they all had discovered that sexual energy was the most powerful of these inner energies. But here we come to a crucial distinction that must be clearly understood. Sexual transmutation is not the same as sexual repression. Repression is denying or suppressing your sexual urges through willpower or moral conditioning. Transmutation is acknowledging, honoring, and consciously redirecting those urges into higher channels. Repression creates tension, neurosis, and eventual explosion. It's like trying to stop a river by building a solid dam. Eventually, the pressure becomes so intense that the dam breaks, and the resulting flood is more destructive than the original flow. Transmutation, on the other hand, is like building intelligent channels that redirect the river to irrigate fertile fields and generate useful energy. The man who represses his sexuality becomes rigid, judgmental, and often explodes into destructive sexual behaviors. The man who transmutes his sexuality becomes flexible, compassionate, and channels his sexual energy creatively and productively. The difference lies in the consciousness and intention behind the practice. To practice true sexual transmutation, you must first develop a healthy and respectful relationship with your own sexuality. You must recognize that your sexual urges are natural, powerful, and potentially sacred. You must stop judging them as good or bad and begin to see them as neutral energy that can be directed constructively or destructively. This shift in perspective is fundamental. When you stop fighting against your sexual energy and begin working with it, the entire inner dynamic changes. Instead of a constant battle between impulse and control, you develop a harmonious dance between desire and direction. The practice begins with awareness. You must learn to recognize the subtle signs that precede sexual arousal, changes in your breathing pattern, specific tensions in your body, particular thought patterns. This refined body awareness is essential because it allows you to consciously intervene in the process before it becomes compulsive. When you feel sexual energy beginning to build, instead of automatically seeking release, you pause and ask yourself, how can I use this energy more intelligently? You might redirect it through intense physical exercise, focused creative work, deep meditation, or specific visualization. A particularly powerful technique is learning to consciously circulate this energy throughout your body using breath and intention. When you feel sexual arousal, instead of focusing it in the genitals, you can use deep breathing to distribute it throughout your nervous system, nourishing your brain, heart, and muscles with refined vital energy. This practice requires patience and persistence to master, but the results are extraordinary. Men who learn this technique often report levels of energy and vitality they haven't experienced since adolescence, combined with an emotional stability and mental clarity they've never had before. Visualization also plays a crucial role in the process. When you consciously visualize your sexual energy being transformed into creative energy, personal magnetism, or the power of accomplishment, you're literally programming your nervous system to utilize this energy more efficiently. It's like programming a computer to perform a specific function instead of letting it run random programs. A particularly effective visualization is to imagine your sexual energy as golden light, originating in your pelvic region and then circulating up your spine, nourishing every organ and cell of your body before concentrating in your brain as pure creative energy. This visualization, when practiced consistently, can produce measurable changes in your biochemistry and neurology. Intense physical exercise also serves as a powerful channel for transmutation. When you exercise with full intensity, whether through strength training, running, martial arts, or any activity that demands maximum effort, you're providing your sexual energy with an outlet that transforms it into physical, mental, and emotional power. Many athletes have intuitively discovered that periods of sexual abstinence before important competitions significantly enhance their performance. It's not just because they're conserving energy in a physical sense, but because they're accumulating and concentrating vital energy that can then be explosively released during the competition. This same dynamic applies to any activity requiring peak performance, artistic performances, business negotiations, public speaking, creative brainstorming sessions. When you learn to accumulate sexual energy through conscious retention and then direct it toward these activities, your performance becomes qualitatively different, more intense, more inspired, more magnetic. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of the practice is how it changes your relationship with the concept of masculinity. Our culture promotes a toxic version of masculinity based on sexual conquest, destructive aggression, and domination of others. This version of masculinity is, in fact, a perversion of true masculine power. True masculinity, as Napoleon Hill observed in The Most Powerful Men he studied, is based on self-mastery, the ability to channel strength toward constructive purposes, and the magnetism that comes from internal discipline. It's a masculinity that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone because it's rooted in real conquest, the conquest of oneself. When you develop the ability to transmute your sexual energy, you are developing the most refined form of masculine power. You become a man who is not controlled by his impulses, but who consciously controls his inner energies. You become a man who doesn't seek validation through sexual conquest, but who radiates a confidence that comes from genuine accomplishment. This transformation in your masculine essence naturally attracts superior opportunities, resources, and relationships. People intuitively sense when they are in the presence of a man who has mastered himself, and they respond with respect, admiration, and a desire to follow his lead. But here we arrive at another fascinating paradox. When you stop desperately seeking sexual approval, you naturally become more sexually attractive. When you stop radiating neediness, you begin to radiate abundance and self-sufficiency. When you stop chasing pleasure, pleasure begins to chase you. This shift isn't strategic or calculated. It's the natural result of having developed a healthy relationship with your own sexual energy. You are no longer coming from a place of scarcity or compulsion, but from a place of conscious choice and inner abundance. Women in particular are extraordinarily sensitive to this shift. They can sense the difference between a man who is desperate for sexual release and a man who possesses his own sexual energy sovereignly. The former is repulsive on a deep, energetic level, while the latter is magnetically attractive. This doesn't mean you should practice sexual transmutation to attract women. That would just be another form of manipulation and would work against the true benefits of the practice. It means that when you develop a mature and conscious relationship with your own sexuality, this maturity is reflected in all your interactions and relationships. As you progress in this practice, you will also begin to notice profound changes in your ability to make decisions. The energy that was previously wasted on sexual obsessions and compulsive fantasies becomes available for clear analysis, strategic thinking, and refined intuition. Your mind becomes like a precision instrument, capable of cutting through complexity and confusion to quickly get to the heart of any matter. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men possessed an almost supernatural ability to make quick and accurate decisions. They weren't paralyzed by overanalysis, nor were they impulsive in their choices. They possessed a combination of clear logic and refined intuition that allowed them to navigate complex situations with confidence and precision. This refined decision-making ability is one of the most valuable fruits of sexual transmutation. When your mental energy isn't constantly being drained by sexual impulses, it becomes available for higher cognitive processes. You develop the ability to hold multiple variables in mind simultaneously, to see patterns that others miss, to anticipate consequences that others don't consider. But perhaps the deepest benefit of the practice is the development of a genuine connection with your own life purpose. When you stop wasting energy on compulsive sexual distractions, you create inner space to hear the voice of your own soul, to sense the direction of your own deepest creative impulses. Many men live lives of quiet desperation, as Thoreau observed, because they've lost touch with their own creative essence. They work at jobs that don't inspire them, live in relationships that don't nourish them, pursue goals that don't reflect their deepest values. This disconnection from purpose often leads to a compulsive search for distractions, and sexual distraction is one of the most powerful and destructive. When you learn to conserve and transmute your sexual energy, you automatically become more sensitive to your own authentic creative impulses. The same energy that was previously wasted on sexual fantasies becomes available for inspiring visions about your own potential and life direction. You begin to feel with increasing clarity what truly inspires you, what genuinely motivates you, what is truly worth pursuing. When you feel sexual energy building, instead of seeking release through ejaculation, you can use specific breathing techniques to circulate that energy throughout your body, nourishing your brain, your heart, your muscles, and your vital organs. It's like learning to use a turbine instead of simply letting the steam escape. Visualization also plays a crucial role. When you consciously imagine your sexual energy being transformed into creative energy, into personal magnetism, into the power of achievement, you're literally reprogramming your nervous system to utilize that force more efficiently. It's like training your body to better metabolize the nutrients you consume. Intense physical exercise also serves as a powerful channel for sexual transmutation. When you exercise intensely, especially exercises involving strength and endurance, you're providing your sexual energy with a release valve that transforms it into physical, mental, and emotional power. It's no coincidence that elite athletes often report altered states of consciousness during intense training. Artistic, entrepreneurial, or intellectual creativity represents another powerful channel of transmutation. When you become deeply involved in creative projects that demand your full attention and passion, you're naturally channeling your sexual energy toward higher purposes. That's why artists, inventors, and entrepreneurs often report periods of intense creativity that coincide with periods of sexual abstinence. The fifth and deepest secret is that true sexual transmutation is a process of spiritual initiation. It's not just a technique to improve performance or increase energy. It's a path to awaken dormant aspects of your consciousness, to activate latent potentials of your soul, to connect with subtler dimensions of your own nature. When you learn to master your sexual energy, you're learning to master the fundamental creative force of the universe. You're aligning yourself with the same principles that govern the creation of galaxies, the growth of plants, and the evolution of consciousness. You become a conscious collaborator in the cosmic process of creation and evolution. Mystics across all traditions have long understood that sexual energy, when refined and elevated, transforms into spiritual energy. This is why so many spiritual practices incorporate some form of sexual discipline. Not because sex is inherently bad or sinful, but because its energy, when conserved and transmuted, can fuel transcendental experiences and expanded states of consciousness. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men he studied weren't just talented entrepreneurs or inventors. They were men who had cultivated a connection with something larger than themselves, a source of inspiration and guidance that transcended their conscious minds. They had learned to access what he termed the infinite mind, and the key to this access was the transmutation of their sexual energy. But herein lies the deepest paradox of all. To truly master your sexual energy, you must be willing to lose it. You must be willing to confront your deepest fears about pleasure, power, and masculinity. You must be willing to face the shadows of your sexual conditioning, your hidden vices, your unconscious compulsions. The journey of sexual transmutation is a journey through the hell of your own projections and fantasies to reach the heaven of your own fulfillment. It's a process of death and rebirth, where the man you were, controlled by impulses, scattered by desires, drained by compulsions, dies so that the man you truly are, focused, powerful, magnetic, creative, can be born. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires dedication, discipline, and a deep understanding of your own psychology. You must learn to recognize the triggers that fire your sexual impulses, the underlying emotions that fuel your compulsions, the existential voids you try to fill through sexual release. You will often discover that behind every compulsive sexual impulse lies an unhealed emotional wound, an unfaced fear, an unmet need. The man who compulsively masturbates is often trying to comfort himself from loneliness, anxiety, or feelings of inadequacy. The man who constantly seeks new sexual partners is often trying to prove his worth or escape a deep sense of inner emptiness. True sexual transmutation begins with a willingness to fully feel these underlying emotions without seeking escape through sexual release. It's learning to be present with your own pain, anxiety, loneliness, or fear without needing to numb them. Through pleasure, it's developing the ability to ride the waves of your own emotional states without being swept away by them. When you develop this ability to be present with intense emotion without seeking escape, something miraculous happens. The energy that was previously wasted on sexual compulsions becomes available for higher purposes. You literally free up fuel that was being burned inefficiently and make it available to power your dreams and ambitions. But the process doesn't stop there. As you progress in the practice of conscious retention, you will begin to notice profound changes in your personal presence and magnetism. People will start responding differently to you. You will emanate an energy that attracts superior opportunities, resources, and relationships. Your voice will carry more authority. Your movements will demonstrate more confidence. Your eyes will reflect a depth and intensity that were previously absent. This change in your presence isn't superficial or cosmetic. It's the direct result of having learned to conserve and focus your life force instead of dispersing it. It's like the difference between a flashlight with weak batteries and a high-powered laser. The energy is the same, but the focus and intensity are completely different. Napoleon Hill observed that the most influential men of his time possessed this quality of magnetic presence. When they walked into a room, people automatically turned to them. When they spoke, others stopped to listen. When they made decisions, others naturally followed. It wasn't superficial charisma or learned persuasion techniques. It was the natural magnetism that results from the conservation and transmutation of sexual energy. You will also begin to notice profound changes in your ability to concentrate and focus mentally. The same energy that was previously wasted on sexual fantasies and compulsive release becomes available to fuel your capacity for deep thinking, strategic planning, and creative vision. Your mind becomes like a lens that can focus sunlight to create fire, capable of concentrating mental energy so intensely that it can literally transform the reality around you. Many men report that after a few weeks of conscious retention, they begin to experience sudden insights, creative solutions to long-standing problems, and a mental clarity they haven't experienced in years. This is no coincidence. It's the direct result of having freed up mental energy that was being wasted on sexual obsessions and redirected it toward productive purposes. Creativity, in particular, experiences a dramatic rebirth. The same force that creates physical life can create artistic, entrepreneurial, or intellectual life. When you conserve your sexual energy, you are literally accumulating raw, creative material that can be molded into any form your imagination can conceive. This is why so many artists, writers, and inventors throughout history have practiced some form of sexual discipline during their periods of greatest productivity. But perhaps the most profound change you will experience is in your relationship with the very concept of pleasure. Most men live in a neurotic relationship with pleasure, either compulsively indulging in it or punitively depriving themselves of it. Both approaches keep you enslaved to pleasure, whether through constant seeking or constant denial. The practice of sexual transmutation teaches you a third way, the ability to experience more intense and refined pleasure through conscious discipline. It's like learning to savor a fine wine instead of getting drunk on cheap liquor. The quality of the experience becomes more important than the quantity or frequency. When you learn to conserve your sexual energy, the pleasures you eventually choose to experience become exponentially more intense and satisfying. It's like being starving versus being comfortably full. When you're truly hungry, each bite is a transcendental experience. When you're constantly snacking, nothing has a special flavor. This transformation in your relationship with pleasure extends to all areas of your life. You develop a refined ability to discern between superficial pleasures that weaken you and deep pleasures that strengthen you. You become more selective in your food choices, more mindful of how you spend your time, more discerning in your relationships. As this practice deepens, you'll begin to notice your developing qualities our society has almost entirely lost: real discipline, genuine self-control, unwavering willpower. These aren't rigid or repressive qualities, but flexible and powerful. Qualities that emerge naturally when you learn to dance with your inner energies instead of being dominated by them. The discipline you develop through sexual transmutation becomes a template for discipline in all other areas. If you can say no to the strongest sexual urge, you can say no to any temptation. If you can consciously channel your sexual energy, you can consciously channel any energy. If you can transform desire into determination, you can transform any emotion into fuel for your goals. Napoleon Hill recognized that this capacity for self-mastery was the common denominator among all truly successful men. There's a secret the most powerful men in history have known, but few dared confess. A mystery hidden in the shadows of civilization, whispered only among those who understood the true nature of masculine power. Napoleon Hill discovered it. Nikola Tesla practiced it. Mahatma Gandhi mastered it. Steve Jobs leveraged it. And you, listening to these words right now, are about to unlock what may be the most transformative key to your existence. But before revealing this secret, I need to ask a question that might deeply unsettle you. How many times have you wasted your life force in moments of empty pleasure? How many times have you felt that inexplicable fatigue, that brain fog, that sense that something essential was drained from your being after releasing your sexual energy? And more importantly, have you ever wondered why men who reach the summit of success seem to carry a magnetic energy, an almost supernatural presence that sets them apart from the masses? The answer lies in understanding a truth our hypersexualized society deliberately hides from you. Your sexual energy isn't just a biological drive. It's the primordial creative force of the universe manifested in your body. It's the fuel of your genius. It's the source of your personal magnetism. It's the power that, when masterfully transmuted, can transform an ordinary man into a force of nature. Napoleon Hill spent decades studying the most successful men of his time, and in his deepest observations, discovered they all shared a common denominator. They had learned to channel their sexual energy towards higher purposes, not through neurotic, repression or puritanical denial, but through an inner alchemy that transformed the lead of desire into the gold of achievement. We live in an age where we're bombarded with sexual stimuli from the moment we open our eyes in the morning until the moment we close them at night. Our culture has conditioned us to believe that immediate sexual gratification is not only normal, but necessary for our mental health. We've been taught that suppressing our impulses is harmful, that we should release them whenever they arise. But who does this social programming serve? Does it serve the man striving for excellence, or does it serve the system that needs weak, scattered and easily controllable men? The truth is, every time you release your sexual energy unconsciously, you're literally draining the fuel of your greatness. Each ejaculation represents not just the loss of bodily fluids, but the dissipation of an electric, magnetic and spiritual force that could be fueling your creativity, your determination, your leadership ability, and your charismatic presence. The ancients knew this secret. The Taoist masters of ancient China taught about the conservation of Jing, the vital essence. The yogis of India developed sophisticated techniques of brahmacharya, the mastery of sexual energy. Medieval alchemists spoke of the philosopher's stone as a metaphor for the transmutation of this primordial force. And Napoleon Hill, observing the industrial titans of his era, realized that they had all discovered, intuitively or consciously, how to convert this energy into material and spiritual power. But make no mistake, we're not talking about forced celibacy or sexual repression. We're talking about something far more sophisticated and powerful. We're talking about conscious transmutation, inner alchemy, transforming the fire of desire into fuel for your highest aspirations. Imagine for a moment that your sexual energy is like a powerful river. Most men allow this river to flow uncontrollably, wasting its force on unproductive terrain. But the wise man builds a dam, not to permanently stop the flow, but to channel that energy intelligently, directing it to turn the turbines of his dreams, to irrigate the fields of his ambitions, to generate the electricity of his genius. The first secret Napoleon Hill discovered is that sexual energy is creative energy. There's no fundamental difference between the impulse that drives a man to create a child and the impulse that drives him to create a masterpiece, a business empire, or a scientific discovery. The same force that moves the hips in a moment of passion is the force that moves the mind in a moment of inspiration. The difference lies only in the direction of the flow. When you consciously retain your sexual energy, you're not simply saving bodily fluids. You're accumulating life force. You're concentrating creative power. You're building an internal pressure that will transform into external pressure on the world. It's like an athlete training at high altitude. When he descends to sea level, his performance becomes supernatural compared to others. But herein lies a profound paradox that few understand. To master your sexual energy, you must first fully embrace it. You can't repress it, deny it, or pretend it doesn't exist. You need to look it in the eye, understand its nature, respect its power, and then learn to dance with it instead of being dragged by it. Modern society has created a sick relationship with sexuality. On one hand, we have religious repression that demonizes desire and creates deep neuroses. On the other hand, we have unrestrained sexual liberation that transforms the sacred into the profane, that reduces the creative force of the universe to mere entertainment. Both extremes are paths to weakness and dissipation. The path of the powerful man is the conscious middle way. It's acknowledging that your sexual energy is sacred without making it taboo. It's honoring its power without being enslaved by it. It's understanding that you possess within you an energetic potential as powerful as a nuclear power plant, and that your responsibility is to learn to operate it with mastery. Napoleon Hill observed that highly successful men rarely spoke openly about this aspect of their lives, but all showed clear signs of sexual transmutation. They possessed a focused intensity, a superhuman capacity for work, a personal magnetism that attracted opportunities and people. They didn't seem drained or scattered, but men who had discovered how to convert base energy into refined energy. The second secret is that the conscious retention of semen produces measurable biochemical and neurological changes in your body. When you ejaculate, you're not just losing sperm. You're losing zinc, magnesium, proteins, vitamins, and a host of compounds your body invested significant energy in producing. More importantly, you're disrupting delicate hormonal processes that, when preserved, create a state of superior vitality and mental clarity. Modern studies confirm what the ancients always knew. Seminal retention increases testosterone levels, improves cognitive function, intensifies motivation, and amplifies confidence. It's no coincidence that elite athletes often practice sexual abstinence before major competitions. They intuitively know they're conserving something precious, something that can make the difference between victory and defeat. But the true power of retention isn't just in the physical aspect, it's in the psychological and spiritual. When you consciously decide not to disperse your sexual energy, you're making a powerful statement to your subconscious. You're in control. You're not a slave to your impulses. You're the master of your own inner house. This assertion of self-mastery resonates through all areas of your life. The man who can say no to the strongest sexual impulse can say no to any temptation. The man who can consciously channel his sexual energy can consciously channel any energy. The man who masters the most primal desire is prepared to master any challenge life throws his way. The third secret Napoleon Hill uncovered is that untransmuted sexual energy seeks an outlet through destructive channels. If you don't consciously direct it toward higher purposes, it will find its own way, often through addiction, compulsions, misdirected aggression, or mental scatter. It's like steam in a pressure cooker. If there's no controlled release valve, the explosion is inevitable and destructive. Many modern men are trapped in vicious cycles of compulsive masturbation, pornography, and frequent ejaculation without realizing they're literally draining their life force. They feel constantly tired, mentally foggy, emotionally unstable, and spiritually empty. But they don't connect these symptoms to their sexual habits. It's like an athlete who trains intensely during the day and then punctures their own tires at night, without understanding why they can't win races. Pornography, in particular, represents one of the greatest threats to masculine power in the modern age. Not only because it consumes time and energy, but because it programs the brain, to respond to artificial stimuli instead of real sexual energy. It creates a disconnect between the man and his own life force, turning him into a passive consumer of fantasies instead of an active creator of reality. When Napoleon Hill studied men like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Andrew Carnegie, he noticed they all possessed a focused intensity that seemed almost supernatural. They could work long hours without fatigue, maintain mental clarity under extreme pressure, and inspire loyalty and admiration in everyone around them. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the direct result of having learned to channel their sexual energy toward their higher purposes. The fourth secret is that sexual transmutation requires specific techniques and disciplined practices. It's not enough to simply decide to stop ejaculating. You need to learn how to consciously redirect that accumulated energy. The ancients developed sophisticated methods for this purpose: breathing exercises, visualizations, meditation techniques, specific physical practices. Breathing is fundamental to this process. This clarity of purpose is like a magnet that attracts all the necessary resources for its realization. When you know with absolute certainty what you want to create in the world, when your vision is fueled by the concentrated force of your transmuted sexual energy, you become an irresistible force of manifestation. Napoleon Hill recognized that all truly successful men possessed this quality of defined purpose, fueled by concentrated energy. They weren't scattered men pursuing multiple superficial goals. They were focused men channeling all their vital force toward one specific and powerful vision. But here we arrive at a truth that may be difficult to accept. The practice of sexual transmutation will inevitably confront you with shadowy aspects of your own psyche that you may have spent years avoiding. When you stop using sexual release as an escape mechanism, you are forced to confront the underlying emotions, fears, and insecurities you were numbing. This confrontation with your own shadow self is an essential part of the transformation process. You may uncover suppressed anger, unprocessed grief, fear of inadequacy, anxiety about your worth as a man. These emotions can be intense and uncomfortable, but your willingness to feel them fully without seeking escape is precisely what unlocks the energy that was trapped within them. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist, taught that we cannot transcend what we do not integrate. You cannot access your higher power without first acknowledging and embracing your lower aspects. True sexual transmutation requires this courageous integration of all aspects of your psyche. Many men discover, for example, that behind their sexual compulsion lies a deep-seated fear of not being man enough. They use sexual conquest or masturbation as a way to constantly prove their own masculinity. When they stop engaging in these behaviors, they must directly confront this fear and discover a more authentic and stable source of masculine identity. Others discover that their compulsive sexuality is a way of avoiding real emotional intimacy. It's easier to have superficial sexual encounters than to face the vulnerability of deep emotional connection. The practice of retention forces them to develop intimacy skills they had been avoiding. Still others realize they use sexual release as a way to regulate difficult emotions. When they feel anxious, depressed, frustrated, or overwhelmed, they automatically resort to masturbation as a form of temporary anesthesia. When this option is removed, they must learn more mature and effective ways of processing challenging emotional states. Each of these discoveries, though initially uncomfortable, represents an opportunity for growth and energy release. When you stop using energy to maintain neurotic patterns, that energy becomes available for constructive purposes. It's like discovering you were spending half your income on subscriptions you'd forgotten about. When you cancel them, you suddenly have far more resources available. The journey of sexual transmutation will also teach you about the difference between pleasure and happiness, between temporary satisfaction and lasting fulfillment. Our culture constantly conflates these concepts, teaching us that the pursuit of pleasure is the path to happiness. But any honest person who has examined their own experience knows this isn't true. Pleasure is intense but brief. Happiness is subtle but enduring. Pleasure often leaves you wanting more. Happiness leaves you feeling complete. Pleasure can be obtained through external stimuli. Happiness must be cultivated through internal development. When you learn to postpone or transmute immediate pleasures into lasting fulfillment, you are developing a capacity that applies to all areas of life. You become able to make choices based on long-term benefits instead of instant gratification. This capacity is absolutely essential for any form of genuine success. The man who can postpone immediate sexual pleasure to build energy for a creative project can also postpone the pleasure of impulsive shopping to build wealth, can postpone the pleasure of unhealthy food to build health, can postpone the pleasure of entertainment to build knowledge. Discipline is transferable. As you progress in this practice, you will also begin to experience states of consciousness that are rarely accessible to the average modern man. When your sexual energy is conserved and refined, it can fuel deep meditative experiences, sudden intuitive insights, and moments of transcendental clarity about the nature of reality. Mystics of all traditions have always known that sexual energy, when refined through spiritual practices, can be transformed into spiritual energy. This transformation is not metaphorical or symbolic, it is literal and experiential. The same force that can create physical life can, when properly refined, create experiences that transcend the normal limits of consciousness. Napoleon Hill was aware of this spiritual dimension of sexual transmutation, although he spoke of it in a more pragmatic way. He observed that the most successful men frequently reported experiences of sudden inspiration, insights that seemed to come from a source beyond their conscious minds, creative solutions that appeared as if by magic. These experiences are not coincidence or luck. They are the natural result of having learned to refine and focus vital energy to the point where it can fuel expanded states of consciousness. It's like the difference between a diffused light and a laser. The energy is similar, but the focus and intensity create entirely different possibilities. But it's crucial to understand that these expanded states are not the goal of the practice. They are natural side effects of having learned to use your energy more efficiently. If you practice sexual transmutation specifically to achieve mystical experiences, you are missing the point and will likely fail at both goals. The true goal is to develop mastery over your own internal energies so that you can consciously direct them toward any purpose you choose. If that purpose is building a business, your refined energy will fuel entrepreneurial vision and relentless determination. If it's creating art, it will fuel inspiration and technical skill. If it's spiritual development, it will fuel meditative states and intuitive insight. This flexibility and conscious control over your own energies is what distinguishes the truly powerful man from the average man. The average man is controlled by his energies. He reacts to impulses, is swept away by emotions, is dominated by compulsions. The powerful man controls his energies. He directs impulses, transforms emotions, utilizes what were formerly compulsions as fuel for his goals. The practice of sexual transmutation is essentially a training in self-mastery. And self-mastery, as Napoleon Hill realized, is the foundation of all genuine success. You cannot master external circumstances until you first master your own internal responses. You cannot lead others until you first learn to lead yourself. This principle applies to all areas of life. The entrepreneur who can't control their own consumerist impulses can't build sustainable wealth. The artist who can't discipline their creative habits can't produce meaningful works. The leader who can't govern their own emotions can't inspire confidence in others. Sexual energy, being the most powerful and primal of all human energies, offers the most effective training ground for the development of self-mastery. If you can learn to consciously dance with this energy instead of being dragged by it, you can learn to do the same with any energy or impulse. But the practice also teaches something even deeper: the difference between force and power. Force is the ability to impose your will through effort or coercion. Power is the ability to align yourself with natural forces so that they work through you without resistance. The man who uses force to repress his sexual impulses is in constant battle with himself. This battle is exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. The man who develops power through understanding and conscious transmutation works with his natural energies, directing them instead of fighting against them. This distinction between force and power manifests in all areas of life. The leader, who uses force to control others, creates resistance and eventual rebellion. The leader who develops genuine power inspires others to follow willingly. The entrepreneur who uses force to push sales creates reluctant customers. The entrepreneur who develops magnetic power attracts customers naturally. Sexual transmutation teaches you to develop genuine power, the kind of influence that comes from inner alignment and personal mastery instead of manipulation or coercion. When you master your own inner energies, you naturally emanate an authority that others recognize and respect. As the practice deepens, you will also discover that you are developing a refined ability to perceive and work with subtle energies. In all your interactions, you will become more sensitive to the energetic states of other people, more capable of positively influencing the emotional climate of any situation, more skillful at creating rapport and trust. This refined energetic sensitivity is one of the most valuable tools that any leader, salesperson, artist, or communicator can develop. When you can accurately sense another person's internal state and respond appropriately, you can establish connection and influence that transcend superficial words or techniques. Napoleon Hill observed that the most persuasive men he studied possessed this almost telepathic quality of connection with others. They seemed to know intuitively how to approach each person, which words to use, when to speak, and when to listen. This ability wasn't learned through books or courses. It was the natural result of having refined their own energetic sensitivity through practices like sexual transmutation. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of the whole practice is how it changes your relationship with time. When you stop wasting energy on sexual compulsions, you suddenly have much more time available, not just the time you previously spent on masturbation or sexual pursuit, but also the time you spent on fantasies, obsessions, and recovering from the fatigue that follows compulsive sexual release. More importantly, the time you do have becomes more valuable because you have more energy and focus to use it productively. It's like the difference between trying to work with a dull tool versus a sharp one. You can accomplish far more in much less time when your mental energy is focused and clear. Many men discover they can accomplish in a few hours of focused work what previously took days to complete. This increased efficiency isn't just about time management. It's about having access to higher levels of mental and creative energy that are only available when you're not constantly draining your life force. This shift in relationship with time also affects your ability to think strategically about the future. When you're not constantly seeking immediate gratification, you naturally develop a long-term perspective. You become more willing to make investments that will only bear fruit in the future, more capable of maintaining present discipline for distant benefits. This long-term orientation is absolutely essential for any form of sustainable success. Real wealth is built over decades, not days. Deep relationships are cultivated over years, not weeks. Mastery in any field requires decades of dedicated practice. The man who is constantly seeking immediate gratification doesn't have the patience or persistence necessary for these long-term endeavors. As you progress in this practice, you will also begin to notice that your relationship with challenges and obstacles fundamentally changes. When you possess abundant energy and clear focus, problems that previously seemed overwhelming become merely interesting puzzles to solve. You develop a confidence based not on external circumstances, but on your own ability to handle any situation that arises. This confidence based on inner competence is entirely different from confidence based on external validation. It cannot be shaken by criticism, rejection, or temporary setbacks because it doesn't depend on the approval of others. It's based on direct knowledge of your own ability to generate energy, maintain focus, and persist through difficulties. Napoleon Hill identified this quality of unshakable confidence as one of the distinguishing characteristics of all truly successful men. They weren't men who never faced challenges or setbacks. They were men who had developed such mastery over their own internal responses that no external circumstance could diminish their determination or clarity of purpose. But here we arrive at a paradoxical truth that lies at the heart of all real transformation. To truly master something, you must first be mastered by it. To transcend your sexual impulses, you must first understand them completely. To integrate your sexual shadow you must first fully acknowledge it. This means the journey of sexual transmutation isn't a path of avoidance or denial. It's a path of courageous confrontation and conscious integration. You must be willing to fully feel the intensity of your sexual desires, to honestly acknowledge the extent of your compulsions, to directly confront any addiction or obsession you've developed. This confrontation isn't masochistic or self-punitive. It's the mature recognition that you can only transform what you first fully possess. It's impossible to consciously channel an energy you're denying or repressing. You must first claim total ownership of your sexuality before you can consciously direct it. For many men, this process of confrontation will reveal extents of sexual compulsion that may be humiliating to acknowledge. You may discover you spend more time with pornography than you admitted, that your sexual fantasies are more obsessive than you realized, that your need for sexual validation is deeper than you wanted to recognize. These discoveries, though initially uncomfortable, are actually liberating. You can't change patterns you don't recognize. You can't heal wounds you don't admit to having. You can't transcend limitations you're not willing to confront. The willingness to see your own sexual shadow with complete honesty is the first step to integrating and transforming it. As this integration progresses, you'll find you're developing a more mature and authentic masculinity. Instead of the toxic masculinity based on compulsive conquest and domination of others, you develop a masculinity based on self-mastery and leadership by example. This mature masculinity is deeply attractive to others, both men and women, because it's based on real strength instead of compensation for weakness. It's a masculinity that doesn't need to prove anything because it's rooted in genuine conquest, the conquest of oneself. The man who masters his sexual energy radiates a quality of presence that's immediately recognizable. There's a stability, a centeredness, a depth that distinguishes him from the average man. He's not constantly seeking something outside himself because he's found a source of satisfaction within himself. This quality of self-sufficiency isn't isolation or arrogance. It's the solid foundation from which genuine relationships can be built. When you're not desperately needing sexual or emotional validation, you can relate to others from a place of abundance instead of scarcity. This shift completely transforms the dynamics of all your relationships. In romantic relationships, you become a partner who offers stability and presence instead of neediness and demand. In friendships, you become someone who can offer genuine support instead of constantly seeking approval. In professional relationships, you become a natural leader who inspires confidence instead of someone constantly trying to impress. But perhaps the most profound transformation is in your relationship with your own creativity. When your sexual energy is conserved and refined, it becomes the most powerful fuel for creative expression. The same force that creates biological life can create artistic, entrepreneurial, intellectual, or spiritual life. This connection between sexuality and creativity isn't metaphorical, it's literal and biological. The same hormones and neurotransmitters involved in sexual arousal are involved in creative inspiration. The same energy that fuels sexual desire can fuel creative desire. The same intensity you feel during sexual arousal can be experienced during moments of creative peak. When you learn to conserve and transmute your sexual energy, you're literally creating more fuel available for creative processes. It's like having access to a high-quality energy source instead of relying on low-grade fuel. The difference in power and sustainability is dramatic. Many artists, writers, musicians, and inventors throughout history have intuitively practiced some form of sexual discipline during their periods of greatest creative productivity. They discovered through experience that conserving sexual energy led to bursts of inspiration and creative capacity that were impossible to achieve when they were constantly dispersing this energy. Napoleon Hill observed this connection repeatedly in his studies of successful men. The most prolific inventors, the most visionary entrepreneurs, the most inspiring leaders, all showed signs of having learned to channel sexual energy into creative expression. They possessed a focused intensity and a capacity for output that seemed almost superhuman. This amplified creative capacity isn't limited to the traditional arts. It applies equally to entrepreneurial creativity, problem-solving, technical, innovation, and strategic thinking. Any activity that requires imagination, vision, or synthesizing ability benefits dramatically from transmuted sexual energy. When you have access to this refined creative fuel, you become able to see solutions others miss, to connect seemingly unrelated ideas, to imagine possibilities that transcend apparent limitations. Your mind becomes like a laboratory, where seemingly disparate elements can be combined into entirely new syntheses. This capacity for creative synthesis is perhaps the most valuable skill in the modern economy. We live in an age of informational abundance where the value isn't in access to information, but in the ability to synthesize information into actionable insights, to connect dots others don't see, to create value through unique combinations. The man who has developed mastery over sexual transmutation possesses a significant advantage in this environment because he has access to superior levels of mental and creative energy. He can sustain intense focus for longer periods, can see subtler patterns, can generate more original ideas, can maintain clear vision even in complex situations. But here we arrive at the final and deepest paradox of this entire practice. True mastery of sexual energy comes through the willingness to lose it completely. You must be willing to confront the possibility of never again experiencing sexual pleasure, of never again having sexual release, of living the rest of your life without sexual gratification. This disposition isn't masochistic or neurotic. It's a mature acknowledgement that as long as you're attached to any specific form of gratification, you remain its slave. As long as you need sexual release to feel complete, you're not free. As long as you depend on external pleasure for internal happiness, you're in a position of weakness. True freedom comes only when you're willing to let go of everything you think you need to be happy. When you can be perfectly okay without sex, without pleasure, without any form of external gratification, then, and only then, are you truly free to consciously choose how to use your energy. This freedom isn't empty or nihilistic. It's the solid foundation from which authentic choices can be made. When you're no longer driven by compulsive need, you can make decisions based on wisdom, purpose, and vision instead of impulse and craving. Ironically, when you reach this willingness to completely relinquish your sexuality, you often find that it returns richer and more fulfilling than ever before. But now it exists within a context of freedom instead of compulsion, of conscious choice instead of desperate need. This is the difference between the man who is driven by his impulses and the man who directs his impulses. The former is always chasing gratification that remains elusive because he's coming from a place of scarcity. The latter can experience profound satisfaction even in the simplest experiences because he's coming from a place of inner abundance. Napoleon Hill observed that the most powerful men he studied had all achieved this state of inner freedom. They weren't men who had eliminated desire. They were men who had transcended need. They could enjoy pleasure when they chose, but they weren't dependent on it for their sense of well-being or identity. This transcendence of need extends far beyond sexuality. When you no longer need sexual validation to feel valuable, you also don't need financial, social, or professional validation. When you're no longer compulsively seeking pleasure, you're also no longer compulsively avoiding pain. When you've developed sexual self-sufficiency, you've developed self-sufficiency in general. This fundamental self-sufficiency is the basis of all genuine power. It's what allows a man to make decisions based on principles instead of fear, maintain integrity under pressure, and persevere through adversity without being broken. It's what distinguishes true leaders from followers, creators from consumers, free men from slaves. And so we come to the end of this journey through the secrets of sexual transmutation that Napoleon Hill uncovered. You've learned that your sexual energy is creative energy, that it can be conserved and refined, that it can be consciously directed toward any purpose you choose. You've understood that this practice isn't about repression or denial, but about conscious integration and intelligent direction. You've discovered that mastering your sexual energy is fundamentally about mastering yourself, about developing the ability to consciously choose your responses instead of being unconsciously driven by impulses. You've realized that this mastery extends to all areas of life, creating a solid foundation for sustainable success in any endeavor. More profoundly, you've understood that true sexual transmutation is a process of spiritual initiation, a path to awakening dormant aspects of your own consciousness and connecting with subtler dimensions of your own nature. It's a journey of death and rebirth where the impulse-controlled man dies so that the man who consciously controls his energies can be born. Now you're in a position to make a choice. You can continue living as you always have, allowing your sexual energy to be wasted on compulsions and distractions, or you can begin the courageous work of integrating and transmuting this powerful force. You can remain a slave to your impulses, or you can become a master of your energies. This choice can't be made halfway. Either you're committed to the path of conscious mastery, or you remain on the path of unconscious compulsion. There's no real middle ground. Small adjustments and moderation don't produce real transformation. Only total commitment to genuine growth can unleash the power that lies dormant within you. If you choose this path, know that you will be challenged in ways you can't anticipate. You will be confronted with aspects of yourself you'd rather avoid. You will be tested in ways that will reveal the true depth of your commitment. You will go through periods of doubt, discomfort, and disorientation as old patterns die and new patterns are born. But also know that the fruits of this practice transcend anything you can currently imagine. The energy, clarity, creativity, magnetism, and power that emerge from conscious sexual transmutation will create possibilities in your life that are currently beyond your conception. You will literally become a different version of yourself, a version you always knew was possible, but never knew how to achieve. The secret that history's most powerful men knew is now within your reach. The force that moves stars and creates galaxies is pulsing within your own body at this very moment. The energy that can turn lead into gold is available for your conscious direction. The key to awakening the sleeping giant that you truly are is in your hands. The only question that remains is, will you have the courage to use it? Will you have the discipline to persevere when the path becomes difficult? Will you have the vision to see beyond temporary pleasures to the permanent possibilities that await you? Your life is waiting to be fully lived. Your potential is waiting to be unleashed. Your power is waiting to be awakened. All you need to do is begin. All you need to do is choose. All you need to do is take that first step on the most important journey you will ever embark on, the journey to become completely yourself. The time to start is now. The man to do it is you. The power to transform your life is within you, waiting only for your decision to claim it and consciously direct it. This is your initiation. This is your invitation. This is your opportunity to finally live up to all that you truly are.